You know what people seem to gloss over all the time in Star Wars? You see this goober right here? This is a person. I do not care how many times you call me a clanker for it. This is straight up a person right here. It has a personality, it has hopes and goals, and yet no thought is given to the struggles of these beings, of the wants and needs of the average droid. You've got Anakin loving R2 like a friend, and C-3PO like, I don't even know what he likes C-3PO like, some weird halfway point between his son and Frankenstein's monster if Frankenstein loved his creation. You've got other occasional bits of lore where some people are friendly with their astromechs, and you've got Mace Windu offering battle droids a chance to surrender. That's basically it. Well, no more. I say no more of this. Droids are people too, and you know what? I'm gonna hit you with the real truth, a Yariel truth nuke if you will. The Separatists are the good guys of the Clone Wars, and more importantly, they're the coolest army. Now, I'm sure you've heard this before, but I'm not going to be arguing this point like many others may. Where others hit you with subjective facts, I'm only going to be giving you my cold hard objective opinions. So sit back, relax, and listen as I tell you why the Separatists, but mostly the droid army, are the coolest thing ever. All you need to do in return is one simple thing. Stop saying clanker, you droidist. But before we start, Minimaker. They sponsored this video. I have a link. What do they make? Really cool minis. Look at this cool elf on a griffin. Isn't he awesome? Yes, he is. You can get him in 3 different quality levels for display, gaming, and budget, because versatility is one of the best things a company can offer, and Minimaker is a good company. What if you're worried about the items being sold out? Don't worry about that. These minis are made to order and ship within 10 days. No one will deny you your minis. What if you want a mini that isn't available on the store? Email Minimaker and they'll cook something up for you, because these lads do quality work and quality work only. What if you want to pay less for minis? Well, if you buy enough minis, you get points to buy more minis with, and I'm still not done. Use my link down below and code Pancreas in all caps at checkout to get yourself another 10% off at checkout. They're good minis. You can get them for a discount. What are you waiting for? Go now. Go buy the Minimaker minis. Go. Now then, 10 trillion battle droids upon ye. Let's go to the beginning, right? And I mean one certain Sith Lord Cretin who would go on to spark the Clone Wars. Sidious basically orchestrated everything the Separatists would do and led them through Count Dooku, leading some to say this means the Separatists are evil. But by that logic, the Republic's evil all the way down too, wouldn't it be? Sidious is leading it, and leading the Jedi to their deaths, essentially, so if you want to go that route, then you have to accept the Republic and all the clones are evil too. Some may say this is a solid take, and the clone army is in many ways pretty evil. This is a valid argument, however consider, Now that I've set the intellectual tone for this video, Count Dooku. He's a pretty cool charismatic dude. A Sith Lord, sure, but how can someone played by Christopher Lee be completely irredeemable? And he isn't totally evil, even if there's definitely some dark side vibes kicking about him. In fact, even in the most generous viewing of the Republic, you still have to admit he's right about it in a lot of ways. He said the Republic was corrupt, and yeah, it is corrupt. Bribery, nepotism, and more raged across it like wildfire. It was in many ways very much every man for himself, and anyone outside of the core worlds was essentially left to their own devices. In the galaxy of Star Wars, this often meant that you had to deal with slavers, pirates, raiders, and of course, the Hutts deciding your entire planet owed them a lot of money. The Republic doesn't care about any of that. The core worlds pay the most taxes, and the core worlds have the people that help senators avoid paying their own taxes and other corrupt stuff like that, so the Outer Rim and even the Mid-Rim worlds can go blow. Dooku also said that the Republic was inefficient even when it was working, and yeah, I agree on that one too. I'm pretty sure Padme was the only senator in the entire building who actually did any work, and even then half her political career was spent either going back home to Naboo or porking Anakin. Admittedly, a galactic senator regularly going back to the planet she represents is actually a fairly healthy sounding political practice, but also lay off the vacations a bit, lady, you have a war to help win. Aside from the whole secretly led by the Sith thing, there's nothing wrong with people getting fed up with the Republic and wanting out. The Republic doesn't care about you. They barely even care about your tax money depending on what planet you're from. That's how little they give a shit. Let's be real here, most Outer Rim worlds could have unofficially left the Republic and it would have taken decades for anyone to notice. Oh no, Ryloth declared independence. Where else will the senators get those Twi'lek slaves they aren't supposed to own because slavery's illegal in the Republic, but you know damn well some of them were profiting off it in the background. The Separatists didn't secede en masse because Darth Sidious was whispering in the minds of every future member of it. They seceded because the Republic really was full of shitters and wasn't helping out countless worlds across it. But while motives are all well and good, this was just setting the scene for the real meat of the video. I mean, sure, the fact the banking clan and all the other commerce guilds worlds created themselves an army through sheer force of money is impressive, and funnily enough has historical precedent in real life, given what we know about Carthage. And the mental image of some schmuck on Coruscant going to check their bank account only to find it completely drained because the Separatists needed more battle droids is incredibly funny to me. Incidentally, a single battle droid is worth about 1,800 credits, which means if we want to go 1-to-1 on the credits to dollar ratio, you could entirely feasibly buy one of these things and not go bankrupt on the average US salary after a single month. But speaking of, I bet I know what you really want, viewer. You want battle droids, and boy howdy do the Separatists provide. While doing so would be rather stupid for a load of reasons, I fully believe if you remove Force users from the setting, the Separatists would be unstoppable. The Star Wars role-playing game is where I got that 1,800 credits answer from, which, again, that is not a lot of money for the cost of a whole-ass soldier. Cursory searches on Google tell me it costs about $50,000 to train a US Marine. So with 50,000 divided by 1,800, we get the number of 27 fully armed and operational B-1 battle droids for the price of a single US Marine, with another B-1 about 77% completed for it as well. That also means that if you don't spend your money on anything else, the average American could afford their own platoon of B-1s for a little under a year's salary. Immediately, the meatbag clone fans among you are going to be screaming about how B-1s are terrible soldiers, and fair enough, I've seen the Clone Wars cartoon. Hell, I've seen both of them, which means I've seen Mace Windu use the force powers that are surely banned to literally take out all the screws of a super battle droid. And yeah, they get shown as losing plenty often. Thing is, and even I have to admit that this could be seen as a huge cop-out, these are the moments we see on screen in a galaxy-spanning war. We see the Clone Wars, where Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka are having a grand old space adventure, and the battle droids they face are goofy goobers complaining about how they need the droid version of a nap, before General Grievous cuts them down for complaining. B-1 battle droids when they're off-screen are what Necron warriors are to 40k. They march forward, gunning down everything in their path. This is a soldier created for pennies on the dollar that went toe-to-toe with clones of the galaxy's greatest bounty hunter and their space wizard generals, and they won as often as not. A clone trooper is worth 100 B-1s. Maybe that's true. Doesn't matter much when they're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. The Invisible Hand alone could fit 1.5 million battle droids on it. One single ship could drop a small country's worth of soldiers onto a planet. At a certain point, when the Jedi aren't in play, it doesn't matter that B-1 battle droids aren't the best shots or the toughest soldiers. 1 million of them firing at a single point is going to take down the target eventually. I mean, look at some of the 2003 Clone Wars episodes. No footage here, unfortunately, because I don't want Disney murdering me, but look at all these goddamn droids. There is no ground here, it's just a sea of droids. The Clone Wars was the Separatists pouring over planets and overwhelming them through sheer force of numbers. They used tactics, but their droid army's tactics heavily revolved around outnumbering the enemy. Battle plans were all made with the completely reasonable assumption they had numerical superiority and should use it to their advantage, pressing on all fronts despite the odds to overwhelm the Republic. Watch the 2003 Clone Wars, which you will be hearing multiple times in this video, as you've probably realized. There's a montage of them just overrunning world after world, because if there isn't a main character around, even the average Separatist droid is a genuine threat to the denizens of the galaxy. Also, I would like to bring up that one clone in the Clone Wars movie everyone thinks is awesome, who ran up and punched a B-1 in the face. Yes, very cool, very heroic. Then he broke his wrist and immediately died. Truly a fine example of B-1s being weak and pathetic, right? They are also just straight up people, like I said. Sure, the first generation B-1s like in Episode 1 all needed a central computer and were more like the most murderous Roombas in existence, but once they realized that was a weakness, the Separatists did away with it and upgraded the B-1s. Then they were all free thinkers, roger. Good little boys who just wanted to do their part and fight the good fight. Yeah, I'm saying it, B-1s are people too. What realistically separates a clone from a droid beyond being made of meat? They're both entirely artificial, they're both made for war, they're both thrown into the meat grinder while non-artificial beings just hang out from the sidelines. They're both being abused by their space wizard leaders, be it Count Dooku or Jedi who really should have been put down sooner like Pong Krell, the four-armed dickhead. Treat B-1s better, because they're just thinking beings with hopes and dreams. You watch the Clone Wars and most of them are just silly little guys. They get in silly arguments over nonsense like you and your friends. One of them complains about having the worst job in the Separatist army. And of course there's the one that just sadly accepts defeat when Anakin pops out from around a corner before he murders them. Those aren't unthinking machines, those are people. Sure, it may have been in a Lego game, but one of the battle droids had a retirement party. He was excited he made it to retirement and was happy all his friends were seeing him off. Then Anakin and Obi-Wan commit vehicular manslaughter on him. I simply do not care for what you have to say otherwise. B1s did not deserve the hand they were dealt. But of course, the humble B1 was not the only droid the Separatists had available to them. Not even close. The Clone Wars, for as good as it generally is, once again makes even super battle droids look goofy. They're big lumbering idiots who just make for bigger targets and have deeper voices most of the time. There's a very easy way to tell who knows just how terrifying these things really are, though. If you tell someone super battle droids are terrifying and they laugh, they've only ever really watched Star Wars and played games like Battlefront. If you tell them this and they look at you with a 1,000-yard stare, you've found someone who's played Republic Commando. B2 super battle droids were utterly horrifying on the battlefield for anyone who wasn't a Jedi. They ate bullets like no one's business, they could open fire with what was essentially a machine gun mounted onto their arms, and who could forget the wrist rockets? No one forgets the wrist rockets. Even the most die-hard clone supporter admits that wrist rockets are terrifying, and why wouldn't they be? Sometimes even in the Clone Wars, when they weren't facing off against the A-lister characters, these things were monstrous. Everyone remembers Commander Thorne screaming "For the Republic" and going crazy, but realistically for him, this was probably a horror movie scene. Droid ships just keep pumping out more and more durable monsters as he and his brothers are gunned down without mercy. It's like trying to fight against a rock slide when these things are bearing down on you. Sure, they weren't the brightest, with it sometimes being stated that they had even simpler processors and droid brains than B1s, but they didn't need it. Imagine, right, that saying because a Rancor is just an animal that you could take it in a fight. You're right, a Rancor isn't some tactical super genius that's gonna outmaneuver you in the field of warfare. It's just a giant monster that's gonna eat you. That's the B2 super battle droid. Are you a Jedi? If not, then one of these is probably your match. If there's more than one of them around, you better hope you've got an army backing you up, because these things are terrifying. And for all that they were more expensive, sometimes the Separatists just said to hell with it. Throw a million super battle droids at this one planet, everyone on it just needs to die. Funny thing is too, they were pretty clearly not being utilized to their full potential. Even in Republic Commando where they're at their scariest, they're still slow and lumbering beasts of a droid. There was even one B1, serial number R0GR, because of course that's what his name was, that called them exceptionally stupid and that they could barely aim the right way, let alone move with any speed. Then that one Mandalorian episode came out, which was clearly written by someone who also played Republic Commando, because that thing was sprinting across the city streets and ripping lampposts out of the ground to hurl at Mando. Also, the B1 in that scene was clearly in the right, no? Like, Bo-Katan goes, "Oh, you recertified them, huh?" As if the B1 wasn't clearly telling them they were originally programmed for war and that it's their most basic function. Or that he's telling them this as Mando starts kicking them over like a complete asshole. Imagine if that wasn't a droid, or if for some reason people who watched Star Wars didn't think droids were subhuman. That poor guy was just working in the factory when two Mandalorians come in and start kicking the shit out of his employees. I'm just saying that if those were Wookiees and a Trandoshan overseer, everyone would be going, "Oh, that's so horrible, how could anyone do this?" But because it's a B1, everyone just laughs at the silly little guy. Shame on you, audience. Mando deserved getting his shit rocked like that. But enough shaming you over this for now. We have to discuss the roly-poly from hell. Droidicas. They're fast, apparently having a top speed of about 40 miles an hour when in ball form, so already you're not running away. That's out of the equation unless the terrain is incredibly uneven. Star Wars being a sci-fi setting where a lot of battles are on ship hallways, the terrain likely isn't uneven. They have deployable energy shields, they're quite literally made out of sterner stuff than the average droid, and they have twin repeating blasters, because the only thing more effective than one minigun is two. Droidicas are essentially the only droid that's fairly consistently given a level of respect. Out of all the times they show up, the only time I can think one of them is being made a fool of is an early Clone Wars episode where Obi-Wan uses one like a bowling ball to knock a bunch of droids over with. Every other time, they're at the very least a problem that has to be solved quickly. As early as Episode 1, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon just leave instead of fighting droidicas. Sure, they probably could have gotten them, but it's telling that they weren't dealt with like B1s, i.e. cut them down and go back to whatever you were doing. Going back to All Reliable for making the Separatists look scary, if memory serves, I'm pretty sure droidicas are introduced in the same mission you're sneaking through a super battle droid factory. So you're already starting this mission off in a bad way. You're separated from your squad, you're surrounded by an entire factory of the scariest thing you faced up to this point. Then you turn a corner and oh great, Megatron's most vertically challenged Transformer is here to be a problem. And then eventually in the game you find the most horrible creation to ever grace the galaxy. the Droideka Dispenser. It needs no grand explanation because those two words are terrifying on their own. Plop one of these things down, and you have infinite droidekas. We have gone past the level of war crime here because this thing is just straight up a hate crime. Someone went into work just angry enough to want to make something monstrous, but not angry enough to shoot up their office, and designed this abomination. There was even a legend story where Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade found an old droideka that had been more or less rusting away for decades since the Clone Wars. Luke Skywalker is Luke Skywalker. You don't need me to tell you he's kick-ass, and for those not super familiar, Mara Jade was a Force wielder who was Palpatine's top assassin, and eventually Luke's wife. And with these two together, they still struggle to defeat a single droideka. They're utterly horrifying. These things are monstrosities that only lose because they get blasted with weapons meant for tanks, or lifted off the ground by Jedi into oncoming traffic. No, of course they aren't invincible. Get behind one and it'll have no clue you're there, and their energy shields are actually only able to stop fast-moving projectiles. But getting behind one of these things usually just means the droids behind it will shoot you. And go ahead, try and slowly and methodically toss a grenade at one of these things in the heat of combat. Have fun counting the blaster wounds you'll receive for your troubles. And even if you do blow one up, so what? They're droidekas, the hint's in the name. There will always be more droidekas, be that from reinforcements or because the Separatists designed a machine to pump them out en masse into a battlefield. And if you want real pain, play as the clones in a Supremacy match in the most recent Battlefront 2. You can tell the developers must have been Separatist fans because here's how every match goes. If the clones win the ground war, they're going to slog their way to the engines, only for the Separatist team to have every single droideka sitting in front of them with shields up, usually blocking not only shots, but even explosive attacks until they're dead. By that point in the game, every Separatist player will have enough points to keep a constant flow of droidekas sitting in front of their engines, so you can't destroy them in time. If the clones lose the ground war, they can only watch in horror as the Separatists unleash a horde of these things that breeze past the front line, uncurl on the objective, and then either backcap or distract you long enough for the Separatist other players to rush forward. After that, they rush the generators faster than you can get there, and unlike aerial units whose speed is balanced out by not allowing squad respawns on them, droidekas do allow squad respawns on them. So 3 droidekas make it in, and then just like that, 12 droids are now spawning in your engine rooms. Hell is real, and it's facing off against halfway decent Separatist players in Battlefront 2. And I've not even touched on all the specialty droids and vehicles yet. The Revenge of the Sith game gave us a bevy of new ones, such as the flying B-1 battle droids that had blasters and a fondness for only the most aerodynamic of British knife crime. Commando droids had a sword, meaning they're already better equipped for Star Wars than most other beings, and they were both incredibly acrobatic and accurate with their weaponry. Tactical droids, while a bit goofy still, could handle tactical scenarios in a way that only the best of generals and commanders could match. Crunching through thousands of scenarios in seconds, they could formulate a battle plan in moments. Super tactical droids, meanwhile, were the kind of droid that nothing short of main characters could properly outmatch. They ran through millions of outcomes and decisions in moments, and the plans they came up with were ones that almost no one could hope to match, and even if they somehow could, a super tactical droid could form a new one in mere seconds. General Colonial was one such tactical droid, and I feel it's telling that Dooku didn't have him scrapped when defeat was inevitable on the planet of Onderon. Sith Lords and other general bad guy characters in Star Wars have zero problems executing their subordinates for incompetence, which means Kalani analyzing and concluding defeat was inevitable was something Dooku felt was through zero fault of his own. There were only a few of them as each one cost an exorbitant amount of money, and they did admittedly have some lack of imagination, but they were still the most fierce commanders on the battlefield, short of that one four-armed fella I'll talk about soon enough. Also, shout out to that one super tactical droid that put Anakin into hit stun. Going through every single possibility available to him, this super tactical droid determined that the route that had the most optimal chance of victory was to throw hands with Anakin Skywalker. And in that moment, he indeed was the chosen one. Chosen to get folded like a goddamn omelet. Look at that stance, dude. Look at the power in the blow he's about to bring down. Imagine you're Palpatine and you got word that this random droid completely undid all your plans to get the chosen one of the prophecy onto your side. From his perspective, centuries worth of Sith efforts to achieve dominance would have been undone because a smart fridge threw a temper tantrum. The C-3PO may be proficient in 6 million forms of communication, but as a comment on a YouTube video of this moment goes, General Kraken is fluent in 6 million forms of whooping your your ass. I'm sorry to give so much of this video to a 6-second scene that's given zero actual prominence, but Anakin gets so pissed he starts choking the droid out. Droids don't have lungs. This one random schmuck made Anakin so angry and put him in such a spot that he grabbed a droid by the throat and slammed it against a wall like Batman interrogating a criminal. He had to live with that for the rest of his life too. Like, who are the characters who have wounded Anakin severely in Star Wars? There's Obi-Wan, who is a great Jedi Master and his master, Luke, who's the son of the Chosen One, Palpatine, who's the Dark Lord of the Sith, and then this one random droid commander. Anyways, to stop glazing this one random bozo, vehicles. Fun fact, in spite of Battlefront 2, the original version, making all these things crewable by droids for gameplay reasons, these are droids. They've got droid brains, they can formulate their own decisions to some level. They're droids. Aside from being cool as hell, that gives them so much more immediate usage. Clones are rapidly aged up, sure, but a Vulture droid is ready to start dogfighting Jedi the moment it's made. Actually, Vulture droids are pretty 40k in nature, since they're produced on the planet of Ji-Char, which have used proper craftsmanship as a religious practice. Isn't that cool as hell? The same goes for the rest of the droid fleet, short of actual cruisers and whatnot, like those Tri-Fighter things. They're a little goofy looking, but by god are they effective interceptors in a fight. Spider droids are equally terrifying on land as well, because plenty of people already have arachnophobia. The Separatists said, what if we turned one of the most common fears around into a tank? And yeah, that's scary. It's got a huge laser on it too. Those things are terrifying. 2003 Clone Wars has them be absolutely ginormous too. These things step on defensive fortifications like they're nothing. The mini spider droid is a bit goofy looking, but there's another variant, of course, from Republic Commando that's just unfair. The advanced spider droid has starship level armor plating, a cannon that's also rated for starship combat, and while it does have the classic video game weak spot, everything else is basically invulnerable. This is unfair to deploy in combat. This is just cheating. I don't care what anyone says. But the best of them is, of course, the Hailfire droid. What if we took Mad Max and made it a droid? These things are lovely. It's just two big wheels with a whole lot of missiles in between them. Part of their programming even involves specifically having them run down enemies if they can't immediately turn around to be rearmed with more missiles. Vehicular homicide is not simply a potential way to victory in the droid army, it's advertised as a feature. Everyone who's ever seen these movies or played Star Wars games wanted to ride one of these things because they're just awesome. But you know the two best things about them? For one, they're only 25,000 credits. That's significantly cheaper than most real-life cars, and those don't have missiles. For two, do you know what the original purpose of them is? Debt collection. These things were made to collect debt. On the one hand, why? Why would you give the IRS the Missiletron bot? But on the other hand, that's absolutely genius. Evil genius, but still genius. Be honest, if one of these things rolled up outside your house on the orders of someone you owed money to, are you really gonna say no? You're not. You're gonna magically find a hidden bin of money you were saving away for something else to keep this thing from locking onto you, because Lord knows it's already loaded. And the last thing about the droids is a bit of a give and take thing. We'll do take first, since this video is glazing the Separatists after all. There were a variety of things that hampered the Separatists throughout the war, funding of course being one of the chief ones. That and Palps hamstringing them every single time they started pulling ahead. At one point the Seppies couldn't quite repay their loans from the banking clan, which is embarrassing to say the least and no doubt hindered production. But throughout the war, the droids in many ways still only got better and better. Super tactical droids only came about 2 years into the conflict if memory serves, and although specialty droids from the Revenge of the Sith game, if we take them as existing, came about in the final months of the war. It is entirely reasonable to assume that if the war dragged on past Revenge of the Sith, the Separatists would only get better and better. More data for the tactical droids to add to their knowledge banks, more scenarios encountered to custom build the exact droid needed to win the day. The Republic had space wizards leading an army of clone troopers that, while certainly more mundane than space wizards, was still ordered around by Force users, ordered to be created by Force users, and trained by Mandalorians. There's a fair bit of mysticism the Republic called upon for their strength is my point. Meanwhile, aside from Dooku and technically Palpatine, the Separatists just had a lot of money. As flashy as space magic? No, I'd say that isn't. But it's mundane in the same way Lockheed Martin Skunk Works is mundane, and those madmen don't have the budget of several entire solar systems to work with. Had the war gone on, there would have been only better and better battle droids thrown at the Republic, and eventually I'd wager that between the knowledge gained and the droid types produced, the Seppies had a pretty good shot at coming out on top in the end. In fact, I'm gonna go as far as to say they pretty much lost because Sidious was hamstringing them whenever they looked to be getting too strong. They started making Cortosis droids at one point. That's a material that just shuts off lightsaber lightsabers. That's the main weapon of the entire Jedi Order, and it just goes nuh-uh, and its failures isn't a blaster fire at that. Call me insane, but I feel like half the Clone Wars episode starts with some major advantage, or tales of how the Separatists have been on a rampage, only for some defeat to happen and set them back. Is this at least in part because at the end of the day it's a show designed with a younger audience in mind? Yeah, probably. But also, I imagine it's because Palpatine didn't want them to win. And so we hear about how the droid army is damn near unstoppable and rampaging across the galaxy, or they can just attack Kamino or damn near any other place without suffering much for it, but the main characters always just so happen to be able to squeak out a win. Somehow remove Palpatine but keep the Seppies, and you've got a galaxy falling under the iron boots of the battle droids. Also, while he isn't a droid, shout out to Dirge and his IG droids riding into battle on speeders like knights. It's so unreasonably cool. Dirge just shows up and ruins the Republic's offensive for a bit, and while he does ultimately lose, he does also spend a decent amount of time beating the snot out of Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan himself actually dressed like a knight by wearing armor for this fight, something I wish the Jedi Knights would do more often. Everything the Separatists are in is cooler for it, I swear. Certainly won't be as in-depth a section as the droids, but the Separatist Navy is still fun to talk about. No, in the clone counterpart of this video, I did admittedly say that the Republic's Navy gave the Separatists quite the thrashing at Geonosis. That's very true, and I won't recant that statement. But as is a running theme of the Separatist Army, it just doesn't matter. You blow up one ship, congratulations, the Techno-Union has farted out another 20 by the time you got it. Something I feel like I've noticed watching the Clone Wars is that every time the Republic Navy bamps out of hyperspace, it's usually a few Venators and maybe some Acclimators if the writers were feeling saucy that day. A respectable fleet by all means, and the Venator as a ship is both not only a Star Destroyer, but has levels of sauce unmatched in all of fiction. Look at these things. I don't see them and think that it's a shame all these clones have been bred for war, and the Jedi are losing their true purpose due to the war and the dark side clouding the galaxy, and that they're clearly a predecessor to Star Destroyers of the Empire. I think, damn, we need to give another 20 trillion credits to Kuat Drive Yards immediately. But the Seppies have plenty of sauce all to themselves, make no mistake. The Munificent class frigate is only not the coolest ship in fiction, because it has to exist in the same series as Venators, Acclimators, and of course the oh-so-iconic Star Destroyer. The design off-rip is phenomenal. It's got two big prong shields on the front of it, two smaller ones in the back, the classic bridge on the front so the commander may better see the battlefield, and of course, two wings to help it fly better. Those last two things likely make zero sense. That's because Star Wars doesn't make sense. It looks cool as hell, and so this design is great. In all seriousness though, I believe those two wings are hyperspace transceivers to help send and receive messages better, which is helpful to have in a war. It's also surprisingly well armed, with a variety of flat cannons and light turbo laser towers around the sides of it to give it some punch and defense against lighter craft such as bombers attempting to bring it down. But the real kicker are the two front-mounted heavy turbo laser cannons. These things let them take down basically anything the Republic could throw at them given the right circumstances, because Star Wars ship battles are like 16th century Navy battles, and I mean that entirely as a compliment. Two massive guns pointed forward in this setting where everyone floats towards each other to start broadsiding is one hell of an advantage. And of course, since automation is kind of the Separatist thing if you think about it, this ship and all the ones going forward have incredibly small crew requirements. For the Munificent, it has a total crew requirement of 200 droids for maintenance and typical operations. It has a capacity, meanwhile, of 150,000 droids. This is only a frigate, remember, which means one of the lighter ships in the Separatist Navy could vomit out several armies worth of battle droids wherever it landed. There was also apparently a droid brain in it, because of course even the battleships have brains. All of this apparently only costs 12 million credits, which for all that is a steal in my books. Sure, you and me aren't affording that thing, but for a starship that can apparently melt icy planets with its main guns if you give it enough time, 12 million ain't all that bad an asking price. We're skipping over actual cruisers though, because the Lucre Hulk is also a magnificent bastard of a ship. Yes, there's the obvious Achilles heel of it being vulnerable to an 8-year-old flying a ship into its reactor bay to blow it up. Yes, it also costs 500 million credits after all is said and done, so we're done with ships that could theoretically be afforded by people that don't own megacorporations. But you know what? For a battleship like this that's basically just a heavily modified cargo hauler, those ain't even issues. For actual battle, its main complement seems to be its armor, as is fitting a ship with the word Hulk in the name. Before Episode 1, apparently an entire third of all these things in the galaxy were secretly turned into battleships, which while that surprise only ever works once, it's a hell of a shock the first time. Imagine 100 Marines popping out of a semi-truck one day, and that semi-truck had secretly been armored with battleship plating. Blasting through it is basically not an option without devoting an entire fleet towards that ship specifically. If you don't want to try flying through the ship to blast the reactor cores, you need the heaviest firepower around to have a chance at taking these down. Looking at its weapon list, I went to the wiki and boy is it a long list. So I ask you simply take my word that there are more guns on this thing than basically anything else in the fight, in lieu of me listing out all its weapons for the next year. When you have over 50 turbo laser cannons, you are the person with the biggest stick. As for its crew complement, initially that's actually a bit disappointing. Only about 130,000 droids, which is a full 20,000 less than a mere Munificent. That's because the Munificent specialized entirely in throwing B1s and maybe some B2s at you. A Lucrehulk has all those B1s, but also 1,500 Vulture droids protecting it. It has over 6,000 AAT tanks aboard it. 6,000! Just a little something for the battlefield down below, you know? Munificents have more battle droids, sure, but a Lucrehulk is bringing an entire army to your front door. Full complements of armor, air support, everything. And as a control ship, they were best for producing the cheapest droids possible, since the B-1s controlled by them didn't need as much money spent on their intelligence and programming as a result of the Lucrehulk doing the heavy lifting on that front. Again, I understand they were blown up at least twice with the same trick, but the second time was by clones who had hijacked enemy ships to sneak aboard, and the first time was by Anakin Jesus Allegory Skywalker. One of those times was by highly trained soldiers on a stealth mission that still got one of them killed, and the other was by the Chosen One. All things said and done, I can't blame the Separatists for moving away from this ship given the weakness of it, but that weakness isn't quite as severe as you might think in my humble opinion. Also, this thing is built to be basically self-sufficient for long journeys. In fact, it's not only self-sufficient, but its mere existence is the ultimate flex. In a spaceship, any extra room is at a premium, and this thing has 50 rooms dedicated solely for meetings, like office meetings. This is the pinnacle of showing off your wealth. When you're giving battlefield commands as your secretary brings in drinks and you discuss stock prices, you've won the battle of being the richest dude in the galaxy. Of course, the true pride of the Confederacy fleet was the Providence-class dreadnought. These things were the capital ship of the fleet, and they provided in spades. At just over 400 million credits, they certainly weren't cheap, but they're also nearly as heavily armed as the Lucrehulk in terms of weaponry, so the price still gets you plenty of heavily armed ships. Without too much detail, in many ways it was a slightly cheaper but just as deadly Lucrehulk. It was built from the ground up to be a warship rather than a cargo hauler turned into one, with them coming into service not long after Episode 1 and the failed attack on Naboo. It did apparently have 102 proton torpedo launchers on it as well, which I've played Empire at War. That's utter bullshit. That is pure distilled nonsense. I know I've made this claim already in the video, but that is straight up cheating. What do you mean, 102 proton torpedo tubes? That's hacks. That's straight up hacks. And while a semi-unique ship, the Malevolence of course bears mentioning. I think in terms of what a ship can do, this is one of the most busted ones in all of fiction, at least relative to the power of the setting. Massive weapons are all well and good, but they're hardly invincible. The Death Star is the most iconic planet buster in fiction, and given how quickly it destroys worlds, one of the more powerful ones to boot. Not Zeelyverse or anything, but Alderaan was unmade in less than a second. And that thing was blown up twice. Every upgraded version of the Death Star has blown up. Those super weapons clearly aren't perfect. The Malevolence, meanwhile, had the scariest ability possible in space. It just turns your ship off. In the Clone Wars, it was largely limited to shields, but I imagine another blast from its ion cannon could render a ship completely inert. Either way, the first part is usually the most crucial one, because once the shields are down, you're a fish in a barrel. This thing was only destroyed by rerouting its navicomputer to have it jump to lightspeed into a planet. It was never defeated in battle, and perhaps scariest of all, the Separatists had more of them. It was a Subjugator-class cruiser, and they kept them in reserve for dire situations. One single ship could turn an entire Republic fleet into useless hunks of metal, because the range on Subjugators apparently far outclassed Venators at the very least. It was ultimately only ever beaten because Plo Koon's a real one, the realest Jedi around, arguably. All of these ships were combined with many others into a huge navy that pressed the Republic hard at every turn. The 2003 Clone Wars shows it best, as it does many things best, because it's awesome. When you see the starfighters flying up above Coruscant, it looks like a nice background of stars in the expanse of space. Very picturesque. Then it zooms in just a little bit more and suddenly, oh, those aren't stars. Those are just the capital ships blotting out the stars. The Separatists, even after 3 years of grinding warfare, had enough ships to blot out the sun over Coruscant like it's 300. They were warping in so many ships that sometimes an incoming one would just spear through a defending Republic ship. I don't think it was even on purpose, it just happened. And this is more impressive because this is them attacking the core of the Republic. It was over Coruscant. That's the capital of the galaxy. The Republic had every reason to have a ton of ships there. After all, it's where the Senate, Chancellor, and Jedi Order are all located out of. And the Separatists not only matched it, but kept matching it basically up to the end of the battle. All these ships, all of these droids, they're awesome. Everyone loves a good battle set in the Clone Wars, because the droids alongside their more fleshy artificial counterparts are just cool as all hell, aren't they? But let's be honest with ourselves, shall we? With the exception of Republic Commando players, no one really fears the Separatists as a whole, even if they really should. Respect for certain individual weapons and droids' prowess? Sure, everyone knows a droidic is a problem, like I said. But the real fear of the Separatists comes not from their endless droids, nor their ships, nor even the occasional brilliant tactician they have, such as Colonial or Admiral Trench. No, the real fear usually kicks in right about the time the asthmatic cyborg starts laughing at you.
Your screams are like music to my audio receptors!
This man's bodyguards are Magna Guards, a droid so dexterous and deadly that they're a decent fight even for Jedi Masters. Not a winning match perhaps, one that can take them on in a fight without getting immediately folded. That is the opening of a fight with Grievous, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Because after all, what good is a video glazing the Separatists without giving props to their good general? Even in the spirit of this video, some admittance has to be made that a lot of the decisions made in the Clone Wars are a little bit goofy, like Dooku deciding to join the Sith. I agree wholeheartedly the Republic is corrupt and that the Jedi were blind to it, perhaps even enabling it. Was joining the Sith really the right way to go about fixing that? But General Grievous, when he was a normal Kaleesh warrior, he was a great warrior. The Republic, and of course the Jedi, intervened in a war against a race known as the Yamri that he was leading. It should be noted that while yes, Grievous was certainly living up to the name he had taken on around this time, this was a defensive war by him and his people, even if they kinda started taking it a little bit too far. And then the Jedi come on in, side with the Yamri, and the resulting fallout of this brokered peace cause a massive famine among the Kaleesh. Not helping this is that supposedly in Legends, Grievous at one point dreamed of being a Jedi but was rejected. So Grievous instead was scouted out by a different set of people, Count Dooku and Darth Sidious, who decided that this rather angry fellow would make quite the soldier if they asked him to. He agreed, with quite the grudge against the Jedi, and after an arranged explosion on his transport shuttle, he became the terrifying figure we all know. He went from a fierce but still organic general to one who really only had a heart, lungs, eyes, and brain, and even his brain was augmented, as I'll talk more about shortly. From there, Grievous was the answer the Separatists gave when a Jedi really needed to die. Those who were not also children during the early 2000s may wonder why so many people love Grievous. He's hammy and fun to watch do his thing, but he gets beaten by Gungans. For one, if everyone can decide to ignore the sequel trilogy, I can ignore Grievous getting beat by Jar Jar's extended family. For two, that's simply not my Grievous. My Grievous is the one who showed up at the end of the Clone Wars original cartoon. At the end of the first season, Anakin's fall to the dark side is foreshadowed, but Ventress was defeated and the planet liberated from the Separatists. All in all, a victory. Then, just as the credits are seemingly about to roll, Obi-Wan gets a phone call. Some Jedi clearly fighting for his life is desperately calling for help, but his pleas are cut short. We then see thousands of super battle droids surrounding a downed cruiser before a single metal hand halts all of them. Cut forward a bit after some friendly talking, and then boom! One dead Jedi, he's a helicopter, several more dead and incapacitated Jedi. Is he using his fucking feet to wield lightsabers? The clones chase him off, but there he is again, training with Dooku. Now I know that he's out there. He's gonna show up eventually, and he just bodied an entire room of elite clones. Chase more Jedi, some shenanigans happen, but hey, this time they stalemated him. Maybe they got this. He's got 2 more arms. And if you go watch the video version of this instead of just my slideshow, he attacks so fast I'm pretty sure the actual real-life audience is at risk of a seizure. So welcome to Star Wars' coolest character ever conceived. Would you like me to get you a drink after I'm done shitting my pants? George Lucas deciding he was actually a cowardly bitch was a travesty comparable to the burning of the Library of Alexandria. Prior to the 3D Clone Wars, we had 3 times to see General Grievous. The Genndy Tartakovsky animations where he's Star Wars Michael Myers crossed with a wind turbine, the original Battlefront 2 where he starts screaming Roger at you when he's on a killing spree, and then Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith, where he runs away, gets ambushed, and then dies after a brief moment where 6-year-old me thought that Samurai Jack Grievous was about to make a return. And that Grievous was who we got in the Clone Wars. Oh, and I nearly forgot about, say it with me now everyone, Republic Commando, where he looks you dead in the eyes, you have him dead in your sniper's sights, and just calmly walks away. Horrifying. But I won't stand for this, because you know how many Jedi General Grievous killed? The highest number I could find was 247, an oddly specific one that was on a forum post, so I'm not sure how accurate it is. A more canon but also more vague answer is dozens, at least a few of whom were masters across Legends and canon. In his lair, there were dozens of lightsabers alongside his skull masks, as well as some of the spines of dead Jedi. He is prolific at his job, and killing dozens of Jedi over just 3 years is insane. Even if he only killed a singular dozen because you want to lowball him, that's about a dozen more Jedi than pretty much anyone else has ever killed. 11 more if you want to be an asshole and list all the random schmucks who killed a single Padawan to raise the stakes in a Clone Wars episode. In fact, I go so far as to say that in all of Star Wars history, he's the non-Force user who's killed the most Jedi. Certainly the non-Force user who's killed the most Jedi in melee combat. And if you aren't a Jedi, he makes an absolute fool out of you, manhandling you with his hands, feet, whatever's around. Sure, a bunch of clones jumped him once and dogpiled him, but he just scuttled off to do more important things afterwards. He terrified his own allies too, and not just the normal ones. Dooku tried an experiment to make him Force-sensitive once, which failed, but Palpatine and Dooku both had a realization that this terrifying cyborg who could disrupt others' connection to the Force perhaps didn't need to be made a Sith. Part of why Anakin and him never met was because Palpatine didn't want them meeting each other. He was worried Grievous might kill Anakin. Mace Windu, of all people, stated that only Obi-Wan could kill Grievous in the Revenge of the Sith novel. And if there's a Jedi that you can take the word for on combat capability, it's him. And for one more brief moment, which will probably be his last moment of being terrifying or in general, we got him invading Dathomir and Tales of the Empire. Did Ventress beat him at first? Yeah. Then he ordered the droids to start marching and it was all over for the Night Sisters. He marched forward, killed them all without mercy, and when they whipped out their nonsense magical sickles, he just said no and killed them anyways. Him and the droids as a whole were finally shown once more as a terrifying force, marching forward and just bulldozing all in their way. Later on, he also killed Mother Talzin, that wizard witch lady who helped Maul get over his Obi-Wan trauma. Although get over is a strong way to put it since, you know. Kenobi! And you know what? Let's still go with Grievous as he's most commonly portrayed in modern Clone Wars. The scuttlebug robot that runs away at the slightest hint he's in real danger. You know what I call that? Being reasonable. Grievous is a hell of a warrior, but his enemies are an ancient order of space knight monk wizards wielding an unknowable and nearly all-powerful force in battle. They have limited precognition even in battle, can use their mind to crush you like a bug if they're so inclined, and they train frequently in lightsaber combat. Running away when it looks like a Jedi has their shit together isn't cowardly, it's doing what you should be to keep yourself alive. Dooku taught him to attack only when fear, surprise, and intimidation were on his side, because if literally any of those things weren't present, Grievous needed to BTFO. So Grievous took these lessons to heart, and with them killed a whole lot of Jedi. How Grievous fights is by embodying shock and awe so much that it disrupts a Jedi's connection to the Force. He more or less shocks them so much that they can't let the Force flow through them like the monks they're supposed to be, and have to rely on just their skill with a lightsaber. And no one will ever be as good with a lightsaber as the four-armed cyborg trained by the galaxy's best duelist, who not only has all the lightsaber forms plugged into his cybernetically enhanced brain, but also swings at you 12 times a second. The only reason Obi-Wan beat him was because Obi-Wan's preferred dueling form was the form that was the pure basics of defense, and because Obi-Wan, to simplify, could basically turn his brain off in a fight and let the Force guide him. Sure, Windu gave him weaponized asthma in the 2003 Clone Wars, and he was then afraid that if he ever fought Grievous again, the general would learn his own lightsaber style, integrate it into his bag of tricks, and then Samuel L. Jackson would have been alive to get tossed out a window. Even if you want to be as dismissive as possible, Grievous choosing to fight Jedi by intimidating them and overwhelming them with both unfair attacks and nearby droids isn't cowardly, even if good old George wanted it portrayed that way. It's pragmatic. Because you know what? I know my audience. You're mostly tabletop nerds, or I'm certain you're at least some kind of nerd. Go ahead and call Grievous a bitch, but the next time you line up in a D&D campaign or other role-playing game, don't fight the bosses you face as a party. Go on. Line up and fight the boss one by one party member at a time. It's cowardly and dishonorable to jump them all at once, right? Give your DM's boss fight the honorable duel you apparently think's the only way to fight. And if you start losing, you better not run away. After all, running is cowardly. And if you run away, your player character isn't being intelligent by picking and choosing their battles against superior foes. they're a worthless coward. And one final note to end on, for both Grievous and the Confederacy as a whole. Some of you may be saying that the Separatists are evil for committing a slight bit of wartime tomfoolery, also known as a war crime. I'm not even going to pretend that they didn't do that. Instead, I simply want you to look 5 feet to the left at the Republic and tell me they don't do the exact same things. How many times did Anakin and/or Obi-Wan fake surrender? Because in the Clone Wars, I think it was at least 3, which means God only knows how often they did it off-screen. It's no wonder droids don't know if they take prisoners. Every time they try, they get shot. There's a comic where Obi-Wan and some of his soldiers get captured by Grievous, and the Jedi has the balls to bring up conventions that say he must treat his prisoners fairly. Dog, you do not take prisoners. Droids are people. I've seen how friendly everyone is with R2, but suddenly they're painted tan or orange and it's time for the slaughter. And Captain Rex was double-tapping his way across Umbara. Those weren't droids. Obi-Wan killed a man that was surrendering to him. Yeah, he was a slaver, so he absolutely deserved it, and yeah, you let Captain Rex do it because he isn't a Jedi, so I guess it's technically okay by your religion's standards or something. But if you're gonna start throwing the war crimes accusation out, maybe make sure your own house is in order first. And that has been me gushing over the Separatist Alliance and all the cool toys they have. May the Republic dogs get the fate they deserve at the hands of our glorious robotic saviors. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the B1 to my Separatist Alliance, the humble souls putting in the legwork to make sure we can keep fighting the good fight. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching and take care out there. A horror game starring Grievous would be awesome, right? Like maybe you could be a Night Sister on Dathomir running from him, or a Jedi Padawan trying to escape a ship he's lurking on like Alien Isolation. Or just put him in Dead by Daylight. Please do that. That way I can live my 2003 power fantasy, and it'll annoy people who say he wouldn't fit in a game where every other woman survivor has some kind of bikini outfit. Star Wars and anime have no place in Dead by Daylight. Words spoken by someone with a Yui Kimura skin where she has a tail, or literally any Sable Ward skin.